Look what I have. This is the GeForce GTX 980 Ti. Or is it Ti? Ti? Strix from Asus. This thing is a top shelf, top end card. It really doesn't get much more high end than this unless you start talking about the sort of commercial and quasi commercial graphics card that Nvidia offers. The things like the Quadro, Titan, things like that. This thing is crazy. Not because out of the box it's really that crazy. It's really in terms of overclocks and what companies are able to do with it. Asus really is not a lot different than other companies in that they've been able to squeeze out a lot of extra performance at the 980 Ti, but I've really got to say Asus has done it in style. They've really sort of gone above and beyond what we've seen. I don't want to skip to the end and spoil it for you, but in terms of the overclocks of this thing, it was insane. I think that's probably due to the dual 10mm heat pipes, but let's get the specs out of the way first. So this is the STRIX-GTX980Ti. This is the GeForce GTX 980 Ti. When we were in Computex at the Nvidia booth, they called it the 980 Ti. Until Brian emails me otherwise, I'm going to call it the 980 Ti. So, hey, there you go. Alright, so this is a PCI Express 3.0, of course. It's OpenGL 4.5 compatible, 6GB of GDDR5. It has two modes. Of course, the GPU has the base and the boost clock. It's got the stock mode from Asus, which is overclocked, and then it's got OC mode, which is even more overclocked. So the OC mode for the GPU boost clock is 1317 out of the box, and the gaming mode is out of the box. The GPU base clock in OC mode is 1216, and gaming mode is 1190. Now we're going to push past that on our own, but more about that in a minute. It's got 2816 CUDA cores. It's a 7200 megahertz memory clock out of the box. 384-bit memory interface. It's got one native dual-link DVI-I port, so that's dual-link DVI plus VGA. In case you're still using VGA, you can use a DVI to VGA adapter, which is crazy. One native HDMI 2.0. It is HDCP. HDCP is supported, high definition content protection. It has three native DisplayPort 1.2 interfaces. It has one power cable and one Strix laser sticker. It's a cool little thing in the box. Then in the software bundle, it's got the Asus GPU tweak and driver, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. The overall dimensions of this card is a pretty hefty 305 by 152.2 by 39.8 millimeters. So it's a pretty big card. It's pretty beefy. The other thing that Asus has done for this generation of cards is really beef up the cooler. Now I think the cooler on this is also shared with the 390X. If you saw that our 390X video, this cooler from between the 390X and the 980 Ti looks identical, but it's two 10mm heat pipes on the Direct CU3 with the patented triple wing blade design on the three fans that are present here. Asus says that these fans will move the air such that the whole thing runs about 30% cooler and it's about 3x quieter overall, and the fans don't even kick on until this card hits 65 degrees C. So if you're doing light gaming like StarCraft 2 or something like Don't Starve, chances are the fans on this GPU not even going to kick on. The other big improvement this generation is that Asus has basically automated the manufacturing process. There's not really any through-hole components left. That means they're able to set the back plate. There's a nice brushed metal back plate on the back of this card. They're able to basically set that directly on the PCB. The only thing that's really in the way are surface mount components, and there are cutouts for those. So in terms of like through-hole chokes and things like that you see on the reference design from Nvidia, Asus has completely eliminated that, so this is Asus's own PCB layout. And I have to admit, it really does seem like it's well engineered. In terms of the power delivery circuitry, it is a 14-phase Super Alloy Power 2, that's what Asus calls it, but it's a 12+2 power phase delivery system. So in terms of how the card is put together, there is a reinforcement frame that runs around the edge of the PCB, and then there's this Strix Fortifier backplate. Now you get the red sort of aluminum cutout thing that is mounted directly to the assembly that's touching the GPU, and then you've got the solid metal black backplate for the whole card to prevent sag over time. That basically means that when this thing is exposed to relatively high temperatures, because the card wants to run quiet as opposed to running as cool as possible, although it does actually run really cool. Because the card is going to be warm all the time, you don't want the PCB to sag over time, because as the PCB takes up moisture and releases moisture and just warms up and heats up, it can flex over time. With the metal backplate and the reinforcement frame, not going to be an issue with this card. Then the PCB uses all surface mount components, and that's basically a big part of the completely automated assembly process. The completely automated assembly process means that machines are basically assembling these things. There's not really a human component, except when it comes down to, like physically assembling the thing. But in terms of soldering it together, it's a flux-free design, no through-hole components. things like that mean that there's a huge amount of repeatability in putting these together, which theoretically means that you have lower chances, much lower chances of dead on arrival cards and sort of quality assurance, quality control problems like that. Then for the heatsink, this is the new Direct CU3 design. Copper heat pipes touching the GPU directly and dissipating the heat through the heatsink, which spans the entire card. These 3 fans with the triple wing blade design thing basically force air through, or it's 105% static air pressure. So the air is basically forced through the very small fins on the heatsink to better cool the card. And that basically bears out in testing. And doing the testing with the card, especially over at NVIDIA reference design, this card has dramatically improved cooling. And in terms of the power delivery circuit, it's all about the chokes, MOSFETs, and capacitors. Those are all Super Alloy 2 Asus branded. Those are all surface mount, and those are all wired directly into the heatsink. Well, the MOSFETs are. The MOSFETs are attached directly to the heatsink. So in terms of heat dissipation and in terms of power delivery, it's 12+2 phase design, and it definitely seems effective, even pushing this card past 1500 megahertz. You've also got LEDs on the power connector, as has been the case for cards in prior generations. You've got a white LED if the power connectors are plugged in correctly, otherwise you get a red LED letting you know that the power cable's not in correctly or there's something wrong. Now also shipping with this card is GPU Tweak 2, which I have a storied history with GPU Tweak 2, but on the NVIDIA cards it seems a lot more stable than when you're doing terrible things with overclocks on Team Red. Also included with the Strix is an XSplit Premium license. It's a 1-year license good for XSplit Premium. So if you're into streaming and you use XSplit, there you go. Me personally, I use OBS, but if you're an XSplit person, you get a year. So that's a nice bundled feature. Now in terms of GPU Tweak 2, they've made it pretty easy to toggle between the different modes, between game mode and OC mode. You're going to see the highest clocks from OC mode, but if you want to really push the clocks, you're going to want to put it in manual and sort of do things yourself, which ends up being under the My Profile section of that. Also included in GPU Tweak 2 are some utilities to help you with other parts of your system. There's a utility that will shut down unneeded system services. There's a utility that will do memory defragmentation. I haven't really had a chance to dive into the memory defragmentation thing, but it's on my to-do list. So the memory defragmentation thing basically moves all of the stuff in memory so that you have continuous free pages in memory. Memory fragmentation historically has been a little bit of an annoyance on Windows, and so I would be sort of interested to see how that performs. So we ran our own benchmarks at the stock game mode, which is a 1216 megahertz clock out of the box with the 7200 megahertz memory clock, and those benchmarks are on the article on the website if you want to see them. We ran Shadow of Mordor, Trine 3, Witcher 3, and then we ran the same benchmarks overclocked, and all of that is available on the website. We've got the fraps graphs, the frame timing, the whole 9 yards. Really dove in and take a look at this thing. In terms of how far we were able to push the card, it was kind of insane. The core clock was 1311, the boost clock was 1412, the maximum boost clock that we were able to get was 1525.1 with the maximum memory clock at 7700. Now out of the box the memory clock 7200, so we pushed the memory clock another 500 megahertz. We cranked the fans, and let me tell you, the fans can really move a lot of air. So if you don't really care how quiet the card is, the fans will move a ridiculous amount of air, vacuum cleaner levels of air, in fact. Now it's not as loud as a vacuum. That's not actually, a bad thing. It is moving an insane amount of air, and as much air as it was moving, I was surprised honestly that it was not louder. If you've got a reasonable tower case, this kind of thing's not going to bother you. We were running at 1500 megahertz, over 1500 megahertz, 1525. So is it any wonder that this thing was producing a ridiculous amount of heat? No, but it held together, and that was the most impressive thing. So in terms of heatsink and in terms of performance card or enthusiast card, this thing delivers. It is a top shelf card. It comes with a top shelf price. Me personally, I'm more deal oriented, I should say. And NVIDIA sort of has the top stuff right now. I really think that AMD's HBM architecture is the future. I think that a lot of GPU development is going to go into that, and I think we're going to see NVIDIA cards with that architecture in the next few years because there's no other option but to do that. But right now, it seems like NVIDIA is on the king of the hill in terms of price, in terms of value. Now, the stock clocks on the 980 Ti are not nearly as impressive as how far you're able to overclock these things. but these cards command a premium price. Be sure to check out the full benchmarks over in the forum at techsyndicate.com. Oh, and let me know if I got anything wrong, because, yeah, I don't really know. I'm just sort of goofing off. But I'm going to go back to playing with these things because, oh my goodness, 4K, 4K. I'm Wendell, I'm signing out. I'll see you later.